April 10th, 1912, Southampton, England. The largest moving object ever built by human hands sits at the dock, her 4 funnels gleaming against an overcast sky. She cost $7.5 million to construct. She weighs 46,000 tons. She stretches 882 feet, longer than 4 city blocks laid end to end. And according to the men who designed her, she is virtually unsinkable. 5 days later, she is at the bottom of the North Atlantic. 1,500 people are dead, and the company that built her, the company that once dominated transatlantic travel, that pioneered luxury ocean liners, that carried millions of passengers across the most lucrative shipping route on Earth, has just received a wound from which it will never recover. The White Star Line didn't collapse overnight. It took another 22 years of slow bleeding, a second ship lost to a German mine, a fleet decimated by war, a global depression that strangled the industry, and a humiliating forced merger with its greatest rival. By 1934, the company that Thomas Ismay built from a bankrupt shipping line he purchased for £1,000 was gone, absorbed, erased. This is the story of how one family's obsession with size over speed built an empire, and how a single decision made in a boardroom destroyed it. How a cost-cutting measure that saved a few £1,000s in lifeboat davits ended up costing 1,500 lives, sinking 2 Olympic-class liners and obliterating a century of accumulated reputation. This isn't just about icebergs. This is about the fatal cost of arrogance. The danger of believing your ship is unsinkable when the sea is infinitely patient. Welcome inside the White Star Line, where the world's greatest shipping empire was built, dominated, and destroyed. Maryport, Cumberland, 1837. A boy named Thomas Henry Ismay is born in a small cottage overlooking the harbour. His father operates a modest shipbuilding and timber business. The family isn't poor, but they aren't wealthy either. What they have is proximity to the sea, and Thomas grows up surrounded by rope, tar, and the constant rhythm of ships being built. At 16, he leaves for Liverpool, takes an apprenticeship with Emery, Tomlinson and Company, one of the city's established ship brokers. For 5 years, he learns the trade during the golden age of clipper ships, fast wooden vessels racing tea from China, wool from Australia, emigrants to the New World. He watches fortunes made and lost on single voyages. He studies which companies survive and which disappear. After completing his apprenticeship, Thomas travels South America, the Caribbean. He sees how shipping works on 3 continents. He watches captains, owners, brokers. He takes mental notes on everything. By his late 20s, he's back in Liverpool, a respected figure in maritime circles, ambitious, impatient, ready. Then comes the opportunity. The original White Star Line was founded in 1845 by John Pilkington and Henry Threlfall Wilson. They made fortunes during the Australian gold rush, running clipper ships packed with emigrants chasing dreams of wealth. Their house flag featured a white star on a red pennant, taken from a figurehead of a Native American chief. For 2 decades, they prospered, but the world changed. Steamships began replacing sail. The company borrowed heavily to compete, and in 1867, the Royal Bank of Liverpool collapsed. White Star owed £527,000. Bankruptcy, liquidation, the ships auctioned, the name worthless, almost worthless. On January 18, 1868, Thomas Henry Ismay purchases the White Star name, house flag, and goodwill for exactly £1,000. £1,000 for a dead brand attached to a mountain of debt. His colleagues think he's mad. Thomas thinks he's found his future. The following year, during a game of billiards in Liverpool, Thomas meets Gustav Christian Schwab. Wealthy merchant, connected, influential. Schwab has a nephew named Gustav Wilhelm Wolff, who co-owns a shipyard in Belfast called Harland and Wolff. Schwab makes Thomas an offer. He'll finance an entire fleet of new steamships on one condition. Every vessel must be built by his nephew's company. Thomas agrees, but he adds his own term. Harland and Wolff will never build ships for White Star's competitors. The handshake seals a partnership that will last 6 decades. On September 6, 1869, Thomas forms the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company. Capital, £400,000. He holds 50 shares. Schwab holds 12. The first orders go immediately to Belfast. 4 iron-hulled steamers designed to revolutionize transatlantic travel. Not the fastest ships, not the cheapest, but the most comfortable, the most reliable, the most trusted. This is Thomas Ismay's philosophy. Speed wins headlines, comfort wins passengers, safety wins loyalty. Within a year, the first ship would launch, and Thomas Ismay would prove that his £1,000 gamble was worth more than anyone in Liverpool could imagine. August 27th, 1870, Belfast. The SS Oceanic slides down the slipway at Harland and Wolff and enters the water for the first time. She's 420 feet long, iron-hulled, single funnel, and unlike any passenger ship ever built. Thomas Ismay hasn't just ordered a ship, he's ordered a revolution. Previous transatlantic liners placed passenger cabins at the stern, where the noise and vibration from the propeller made sleep nearly impossible. Oceanic puts her first-class cabins amidships, where the ride is smoothest. Previous ships offered cramped berths and communal washing facilities. Oceanic provides running water in first-class cabins, electric bells to summon stewards, portholes that actually open. She's not the fastest ship on the Atlantic. She doesn't need to be. She's the most pleasant. Passengers notice immediately. Word spreads through Liverpool, London, New York. The White Star Line isn't competing on speed. It's competing on experience, and it's winning. Over the next 2 years, 5 more Oceanic-class ships enter service: Atlantic, Baltic, Republic, Celtic, Adriatic, each built to the same exacting specifications, each featuring the same innovations. Thomas Ismay doesn't believe in half measures. If one ship offers running water, all ships offer running water. If one ship puts cabins amidships, all ships put cabins amidships. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds loyalty. Loyalty builds empire. The arrangement with Harland and Wolff proves equally revolutionary. Most ship owners negotiate fixed-price contracts. They haggle over every rivet. They pressure builders to cut corners. Thomas Ismay does the opposite. He pays cost plus a fixed percentage profit. No haggling, no corner cutting. Build the ship right and we'll pay what it costs. The result is quality that competitors cannot match. Harland and Wolff's workers know their jobs depend on excellence, not on speed. They take pride in White Star vessels because White Star pays for pride. The relationship becomes symbiotic. Harland and Wolff won't build for Cunard or Inman or any other rival. White Star won't build anywhere except Belfast. 2 companies, locked together, rising together. But success doesn't mean immunity from disaster. April 1st, 1873, the SS Atlantic departs Liverpool for New York, carrying 952 passengers and crew. 10 days into the voyage, Captain James Williams realizes he's running low on coal. Heavy weather has increased consumption beyond projections. He decides to divert to Halifax, Nova Scotia, to refuel. At 3:15 in the morning, Atlantic strikes rocks off Meagher's Island. The ship heels over violently. Passengers tumble from their berths. Waves crash through shattered portholes. Within minutes, the stern is under water. The death toll: 562. The worst maritime disaster in the North Atlantic until Titanic eclipses it 39 years later. Thomas Ismay doesn't hide. He doesn't blame the captain. He doesn't issue statements minimizing responsibility. He investigates. He learns. He improves. New procedures for coal calculations. Better charts for the Halifax approach. Enhanced training for navigation officers. The Atlantic disaster teaches him something crucial. Reputation can be rebuilt after tragedy, but only through honesty and action, never through denial. By the mid-1870s, White Star is strong enough to challenge for the ultimate prize, the Blue Riband, the unofficial award for the fastest Atlantic crossing. It represents prestige, headlines, proof that your ships are the best. In 1874, two new White Star vessels enter service, Britannic and Germanic, larger than the Oceanic class, faster, more powerful, and hungry for records. Britannic captures the westbound Blue Riband in November 1875, the eastbound record in December. Germanic takes the westbound title in August 1875, then again in April 1877. For 2 years, White Star ships are the fastest on the Atlantic. Thomas Ismay has proved his company can compete on any terms. But he doesn't abandon his philosophy. Speed is useful for marketing. Comfort is essential for profits. White Star vessels continue to prioritize passenger experience even as they chase records. The company earns a reputation for building ships that are fast enough to be impressive and comfortable enough to be beloved. By the 1890s, Thomas Ismay has built exactly what he envisioned in 1868, the most successful transatlantic shipping line in the world. His son, Joseph Bruce Ismay, joins the company in 1891, learning the business at his father's side. The succession is planned. The future is secured. In 1899, Thomas commissions one final masterpiece, a ship larger than anything ever built, the Oceanic II. She will be 705 feet long, the first vessel to exceed the legendary Great Eastern in length. Thomas Ismay will not live to see her complete her maiden voyage. January 14th, 1899. Belfast. The Oceanic II slides into the water at Harland and Wolff. At 705 feet, she's the longest ship in the world, the first vessel to exceed the Great Eastern in length. 2 towering funnels painted buff and black, a raised forecastle, clean, elegant lines that make her look like she's moving, even when standing still. She is Thomas Ismay's final vision made steel. 10 months later, he's dead. November 23rd, 1899. Dorpool, Cheshire. Thomas Henry Ismay suffers a heart attack at age 62. He's been complaining of chest pains since shortly after Oceanic's launch. 2 operations failed to save him. The founder of the White Star Line is buried in Thurstonton churchyard, leaving behind 7 children, a grieving widow, and an empire worth millions. His eldest son, Joseph Bruce Ismay, inherits the chairmanship. Bruce is 36 years old, educated at Elstree and Harrow, tutored in France, apprenticed at his father's office for 4 years. He's travelled the world representing White Star interests. He knows the business. He knows the ships. He knows the routes. What he doesn't have is his father's iron certainty. Thomas Ismay built White Star from nothing. He risked everything on a 1,000-pound gamble. He survived the Atlantic disaster through sheer force of accountability. He negotiated the Harland and Wolff partnership over a billiard table and never wavered from its terms. Every decision he made absolutely. Bruce is different, more cautious, more willing to compromise, more comfortable in boardrooms than on factory floors. He's a competent manager. He is not a visionary, and he's about to face a challenge his father never imagined. John Pierpont Morgan is the most powerful financier in America. Railroads, steel, banking. He's consolidated entire industries through sheer financial force. By 1901, he's turning his attention to shipping. The transatlantic route carries millions of emigrants every year. It generates enormous profits, and it's fragmented. Dozens of competing lines fighting over the same passengers. Morgan sees opportunity. He begins assembling International Mercantile Marine, a trust designed to monopolize Atlantic shipping. He acquires the American Line, the Red Star Line, the Leyland Line, the Atlantic Transport Line, the Dominion Line. One by one, the competitors fall into his portfolio. Then he comes for White Star. The offer is staggering. 10 times the company's 1900 profits, paid mostly in IMM, preferred shares. For the shareholders, it's a fortune. For Bruce Ismay, it's a crisis. Everyone knows Thomas would have refused. He built White Star to be independent. He structured the Harland and Wolff partnership specifically to prevent outside control. He would have told Morgan to find another target. But Thomas is dead, and the shareholders want their payout. Bruce Ismay is caught between his father's legacy and commercial reality. The shareholders are demanding he accept. Morgan is applying pressure. The numbers make sense. The principal doesn't. He capitulates. April 1902. White Star agrees to join International Mercantile Marine. The formal transfer happens December 1st. The purchase price, approximately $120 million in shares, equivalent to $3.8 billion today. Bruce Ismay stays on as managing director. White Star remains British-flagged per agreement with the British government. The ships keep their names. The crews keep their jobs. But control now rests in American hands. The company Thomas Ismay built from a bankrupt brand is now a subsidiary of J.P. Morgan's Shipping Trust. The British government is horrified. An American financier now controls one of Britain's premier shipping lines. Parliament debates the implications. The Admiralty worries about wartime access to White Star vessels. Something must be done. The response comes directly to White Star's greatest rival. The government offers Cunard Line £2.6 million in construction loans and annual operating subsidies. In exchange, Cunard will build 2 revolutionary superliners, the fastest ships ever constructed, capable of serving as armed merchant cruisers in wartime. In 1907, those ships enter service, Lusitania and Mauretania, each over 30,000 tons, each capable of 25 knots, each capturing the blue ribbon and dominating every headline. Bruce Ismay watches his father's company become a subsidiary. He watches Cunard receive government backing that White Star will never get. He watches the blue riband return to his competitors. He needs a response, not faster ships. White Star has never won on speed alone, but bigger ships, the biggest the world has ever seen. Summer 1907. Belgrave Square, London. Bruce Ismay dines at the home of Lord William James Pirrie. chairman of Harland and Wolff. The two men have known each other for years. Their companies are bound by the exclusive agreement Thomas Ismay negotiated 4 decades earlier. Tonight, they're discussing survival. Cunard's new ships are destroying White Star in the press. Lusitania and Mauretania are engineering marvels. 25 knots sustained. Blue ribbon holders. Every newspaper covers their crossings like sporting events. Passengers want to sail on the fastest ships in the world, and White Star doesn't have them. Ismay and Pirrie study the problem. They cannot beat Cunard on speed. The engine power required would consume so much coal that profits would evaporate. Lusitania burns 1,000 tons of coal per day. Her machinery occupies space that could carry paying passengers. Speed is expensive. Speed is inefficient. Speed is Cunard's game. But size is different. What if White Star built ships so massive, so luxurious, so technologically advanced that speed became irrelevant? Floating palaces that offered experiences no other vessel could match. Ships so large they dominate every harbor, every photograph, every conversation. By dinner's end, the plan is formed. 3 ships, Olympic class, each over 45,000 tons, each 882 feet long, each capable of carrying 2,500 passengers in unprecedented comfort. The largest moving objects ever created by human hands. Construction begins immediately. Olympic's keel is laid at Belfast in December 1908. Titanic's follows in March 1909. Harland and Wolff demolishes 3 existing slipways to build 2 massive new ones capable of handling the unprecedented scale. A gantry 228 feet tall rises over the shipyard. 3,000 workers are assigned to the project. The cost is staggering, $7.5 million per ship, but IMM approves the investment. These vessels represent White Star's future. Everything depends on getting them right. Alexander Carlyle is Harland and Wolff's chairman of managing directors and general manager, brother-in-law to Lord Pirrie, responsible for equipment, arrangements, and safety systems. In 1909, he contacts the Welin David Company in Sweden about lifeboat equipment. Welin has developed a new double-acting quadrant David. Revolutionary design. Each set can lower a boat outboard, then swing inboard to pick up additional boats stored on deck. A single David pair can launch up to 4 lifeboats. Carlyle immediately sees the potential. He proposes fitting the Olympic-class ships with 48 lifeboats, 3 boats per David pair, 16 David pairs, room for everyone aboard, even at full capacity. The Davids are expensive, but the math is simple. More boats means more lives saved if the unthinkable happens. Ismay and Pirrie consider the proposal. They approve the Welin Davids. The new technology will be installed, but not the boats. The decision is made to install only 16 lifeboats, 1 per David, plus 4 Engelhard collapsibles stored on the roof of the officers' quarters. 20 boats total. Capacity, 1,178 people. The ships can carry over 2,500 passengers and crew. The justification is multifaceted. The Board of Trade Regulations, written in 1894 for ships up to 10,000 tons, require only 16 boats for vessels over that threshold. Olympic and Titanic exceed the regulations. More boats would clutter the deck. Passengers might worry if they saw too many lifeboats. The watertight compartment system makes the ships virtually unsinkable anyway. And there's cost. Fitting 48 boats instead of 16 means additional equipment, additional maintenance, additional crew training. Thousands of pounds saved. Carlyle doesn't push back hard enough. Or perhaps he does, and is overruled. The historical record is murky. What's certain is that he retires in June 1910, before either ship is completed. The Olympic-class vessels are the last he'll ever design. The press begins calling the ships practically unsinkable. White Star doesn't correct them. It's good marketing. The watertight doors can be closed from the bridge with a single switch. The double bottom protects against grounding. The ships are engineering marvels. Olympic launches October 20th, 1910. Titanic follows on May 31st, 1911. Two sisters, nearly identical, both with gleaming interiors, both with advanced safety features, both with davits capable of holding 64 lifeboats, both carrying only 20. April 2nd, 1912. Belfast Lough. Titanic completes her sea trials. For 12 hours, she maneuvers through the Irish Sea, turns, stops, accelerates. Her triple expansion engines and low-pressure turbine perform flawlessly. Her steering responds precisely. Everything works exactly as designed. That evening, the ship is handed over to White Star Line. The following morning, she steams to Southampton to prepare for her maiden voyage. April 10th, 1912. Berth 44. Southampton. The largest ship in the world sits waiting. Her hull is painted black. Her superstructure gleams white. 4 funnels tower above the boat deck. The fourth a dummy used for ventilation and visual symmetry. At 882 feet, she stretches longer than 4 city blocks. At 46,329 gross register tons, she displaces more water than any vessel afloat. Passengers begin arriving at 9:30 a.m. via boat train from London Waterloo. Third class boards first, then second, then first. By noon, approximately 2,224 souls are aboard. Passengers, officers, crew, guarantee group engineers from Harland and Wolff travelling to observe the ship's performance. Bruce Ismay is among them. It's his custom to sail on maiden voyages. He occupies one of the finest suites on B-deck. Parlour, 2 bedrooms, private promenade, cost £870 one way, equivalent to $109,000 today. Captain Edward John Smith commands. 62 years old, white beard, the most experienced captain in the White Star Fleet. This voyage will be his last before retirement. He's commanded Olympic for her first 9 crossings. Now he'll bring her sister safely to New York and step ashore into a quiet pension. At 12:15 p.m., Titanic casts off. She nearly collides with the liner New York moored nearby. The massive displacement of water as Titanic passes creates suction that snaps New York's mooring lines. Tugs intervene. Disaster is avoided by feet. An omen, perhaps, or just physics. The ship proceeds to Cherbourg, France, arrives at 6:30 p.m., takes on 274 additional passengers tendered from shore by Nomadic and Traffic. Among them, John Jacob Astor IV and his young wife, Madeline. Astor is worth $87 million, over $2 billion today. He's the richest passenger aboard. April 11th, Queenstown, Ireland. Titanic's final port of call. 123 passengers board, mostly Irish emigrants headed for new lives in America. 7 passengers and 1 crew member disembark. At 1:30 p.m., the ship turns west toward open ocean, 2,208 miles to New York. The crossing is uneventful, weather fine, seas calm. The ship makes excellent time, averaging 21 knots. Passengers explore the grand staircase, the gymnasium, the swimming pool, the Turkish bath. First class dines on 11 courses. Third class enjoys better accommodations than first class on many older ships. Titanic is everything White Star promised. Sunday, April 14th. Throughout the day, wireless operators receive ice warnings from other ships. The Baltic reports large quantities of field ice. The America reports 2 large icebergs. The Californian reports 3 large bergs. The Mesaba sends a warning describing heavy pack ice and large icebergs directly in Titanic's path. Not all messages reach Captain Smith. Not all that reach him are taken seriously. The wireless operators are busy transmitting passenger messages to Cape Race, Newfoundland. Ice warnings are routine this time of year. Ships sail through. Ships always sail through. Speed is not reduced. 22 knots, full ahead. At 11:40 p.m., lookout Frederick Fleet spots something directly ahead. A dark mass against the starlit horizon. He rings the warning bell 3 times and telephones the bridge. Iceberg, right ahead. First Officer William Murdoch orders the helm hard to starboard. Orders the engines reversed. The ship begins to turn. Too slowly. 37 seconds after the sighting, Titanic's starboard bow strikes the iceberg. The collision lasts approximately 10 seconds. Passengers barely feel it. A slight grinding vibration. Ice tumbles onto the forward well deck. Some third-class passengers pick up chunks as souvenirs. Below the waterline, the damage is catastrophic. The iceberg has buckled hull plates and opened seams along a 300-foot section of the bow. The first 5 watertight compartments are breached. The forepeak holds 1, 2, and 3. Boiler Room 6. Thomas Andrews, Harland and Wolff's managing director who designed the ship, accompanies Captain Smith on an inspection. He does the calculations quickly. Titanic can float with 4 compartments flooded. 5 means the bow will sink low enough that water will spill over the tops of the watertight bulkheads into successive compartments, one after another, pulling the ship down by the head. Andrews delivers his verdict. The ship will founder. Perhaps 2 hours. Perhaps less. At 12:05 a.m., Captain Smith orders the lifeboats uncovered. At 12:25 a.m., he orders women and children loaded first. At 12:45 a.m., the first lifeboat is lowered into the water. Boat 7, starboard side. Capacity 65. Passengers aboard 28. The boats are leaving half empty. Passengers refuse to abandon the warm, brightly lit ship for tiny wooden boats in freezing darkness. Officers don't force them. There's no panic. Not yet. Titanic has capacity for 2,224 people. Her lifeboats have capacity for 1,178, and those lifeboats are being lowered with 472 empty seats. 2:20 a.m. April 15th, 1912. Titanic's stern rises vertically against the star-filled sky. For a moment, she hangs suspended. Then she slides beneath the surface and disappears. The largest ship in the world is gone in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Approximately 1,500 people die. Some drown, some are killed by debris. Most freeze to death in water temperatures of 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The human body survives perhaps 15 minutes in such cold. The screaming lasts about that long. Then silence. At 1:40 a.m., roughly 40 minutes before the final plunge, Bruce Ismay boards Collapsible C. The boat is being lowered on the starboard side. First Officer Murdoch is in charge. There are no women or children visible nearby. The deck is nearly empty. Ismay steps in. He will never escape that moment. The Carpathia arrives at 4 a.m. Captain Arthur Rostron has driven his ship at maximum speed through the same ice field that killed Titanic. He rescues 705 survivors from the lifeboats. Ismay is among them. He's escorted to the ship's doctor's cabin and given an opiate. He barely eats for 4 days. He refuses to speak to other survivors. April 18th. New York Harbor. Carpathia docks at Pier 54. 30,000 people crowd the waterfront. Rain falls steadily. The survivors disembark into a city already convulsing with grief and fury. Senator William Alden Smith of Michigan is waiting with subpoenas. The United States Senate inquiry begins the following morning at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Ismay testifies first. The questions are relentless. Why weren't there more lifeboats? Why was the ship traveling so fast through an ice field? Why did the chairman of the White Star Line save himself while 1,500 others died? Ismay answers carefully. He helped load boats. He assisted passengers. He boarded only when the deck was clear and the boat was being lowered. He turned his back as the ship sank because he could not bear to watch. The newspapers don't care about his explanations. William Randolph Hearst owns a media empire and personally despises Ismay. The Hearst papers lead the assault. Headlines scream, "J. Brute Ismay." Cartoons depict him fleeing in women's clothing. Editorials demand the White Star flag be changed from white to yellow, the color of cowardice. The attacks are brutal, sustained, and inescapable. In restaurants, diners hiss when Ismay enters. In clubs, members turn their backs. In newspapers, his name becomes synonymous with corporate greed and personal cowardice. The Senate inquiry lasts 5 weeks. Senator Smith, though mocked by the British press for his ignorance of maritime matters, asks the questions that matter. Why did Alexander Carlisle's original design call for 48 lifeboats? Why were only 20 installed? Why did the Davids have capacity for 64 boats if the company never intended to use them? The answers reveal a damning logic. The Board of Trade regulations were outdated, written for ships a quarter of Titanic's size. White Star met those regulations. They even exceeded them slightly. But meeting legal minimums and doing what was right were not the same thing. If the 20 boats had been filled to capacity, 1,178 people could have been saved. Instead, the boats left with 472 empty seats. If Carlisle's 48 boats had been installed, everyone aboard could have survived. The British inquiry, led by Lord Mersey, convenes in May. It runs through July. The conclusions are less inflammatory, but equally clear. Captain Smith failed to reduce speed despite ice warnings. The Board of Trade regulations were inadequate. White Star bore no criminal liability, but had made decisions that contributed to the death toll. Ismay is legally exonerated. The British inquiry explicitly states that he helped passengers and boarded a lifeboat only when no others were waiting. His actions were technically defensible. The public doesn't care about technicalities. Ismay resigns as president of IMM on June 30th, 1913. The resignation had been planned before the disaster, but now it looks like flight. Harold Sanderson succeeds him. Ismay retreats from public life. He purchases Costello Lodge in remote Connemara, Ireland, and spends months each year fishing and hiding. The disaster produces one lasting legacy beyond grief. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea convenes in 1914. Ships must now carry lifeboats for all aboard. Ice patrols are established to monitor the North Atlantic. Wireless operators must maintain 24-hour watch. The dead have changed maritime law forever. But for White Star, the damage transcends regulation. The company that promised luxury and safety has delivered the worst peacetime maritime disaster in history. Every passenger who boards a White Star ship after April 15, 1912, knows what happened. Every headline about the company mentions Titanic. Thomas Ismay spent 30 years building a reputation. The iceberg destroyed it in one night, and the company's troubles were only beginning. February 26, 1914. Belfast. The third Olympic-class ship slides down the slipway at Harland and Wolff. Her name is Britannic. At 48,158 tons, she's the largest of the three sisters, and she carries the lessons of her dead sibling in every rivet. 48 lifeboats, enough for everyone aboard, even at full capacity. The watertight bulkheads rise higher than on Titanic, extending to B deck instead of E deck. A double hull runs along the sides, not just the bottom. Giant davits can launch 6 boats simultaneously. If Britannic sinks, she will sink slowly, and she will save her passengers. She will never carry a single paying passenger. August 1914. Europe explodes. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand triggers a cascade of alliances, ultimatums, and mobilizations. Britain declares war on Germany on August 4th. Within weeks, the Royal Navy begins requisitioning merchant vessels for military service. Britannic's luxury fittings are never completed. Instead, she's converted to His Majesty's hospital ship Britannic, painted white with green stripes and red crosses. She can carry 3,300 wounded soldiers. The grandest ocean liner ever built becomes a floating medical facility. White Star's entire fleet is swept into the war effort. Olympic becomes a troop transport, painted in dazzle camouflage to confuse submarine targeting. Other vessels serve as armed merchant cruisers, hospital ships, supply transports. The North Atlantic becomes a battlefield. The losses begin immediately. September 8, 1914. The Oceanic. Thomas Ismay's final masterpiece, the ship that exceeded the Great Eastern, runs aground off Scotland while serving as an armed cruiser. Poor navigation in fog. She breaks apart on the rocks. No deaths, but the ship is a total loss. The most beautiful liner of the 19th century ends as scrap metal. The war takes ship after ship. Cymric torpedoed in 1916. 5 dead. Arabic torpedoed in 1915. 44 dead. Laurentic strikes 2 mines in 1917 and sinks in less than an hour. 354 dead. The White Star flag flies over coffins across the Atlantic. Then comes November 21st, 1916. Britannic is on her 6th voyage as a hospital ship, steaming through the Aegean Sea toward Mudros to pick up wounded soldiers. At 8:12 a.m., near the Greek island of Kea, an explosion rocks the ship. The cause is never definitively established. Most likely a German mine laid by U-73 weeks earlier. Some suspect a torpedo. The damage is devastating. The forward compartments flood instantly. Captain Charles Bartlett orders watertight doors closed, but portholes have been opened to ventilate the hospital wards. Water pours through them as the ship lists. Bartlett makes a fateful decision. He orders full speed toward Kea, hoping to beach the ship in shallow water. The movement drives more water through the open portholes. The flooding accelerates. Within minutes, he realizes the gamble has failed and orders the engines stopped. The lifeboats are launched. Unlike Titanic, there are enough for everyone. Unlike Titanic, the crew has been drilled repeatedly. The evacuation proceeds with remarkable order, given the circumstances. But 2 boats are launched prematurely, before the propellers stop turning. They're sucked into the still spinning blades. The occupants are killed instantly. 30 people die in total. At 9:07 a.m., 55 minutes after the explosion, Britannic sinks. She goes down faster than Titanic, despite all her safety improvements. The water is warmer. The rescue ships are closer. The lessons learned save lives. But the largest British-built ship ever constructed now rests on the Aegean seabed. 2 of 3 Olympic-class ships are gone. Only Olympic survives, and she fights. May 12, 1918. Olympic is carrying American troops to Europe when lookouts spot a surfaced German submarine. U-103 has been hunting Allied shipping in the area. Captain Bertram Hayes doesn't run. He turns toward the submarine and orders full speed. Olympic rams U-103, cutting the submarine nearly in half. The U-boat sinks with all hands. Olympic becomes the only merchant vessel in history to sink an enemy warship by ramming. Old Reliable, the crew calls her, the ship that refuses to die. But survival isn't victory. When the war ends in November 1918, White Star surveys the wreckage. Ships sunk, ships damaged, ships worn out from military service. The fleet that dominated transatlantic travel in 1912 is exhausted. The post-war years bring temporary relief. Emigration surges as Europeans flee devastated homelands. White Star benefits from the boom. Olympic returns to passenger service in 1920, refitted and modernized. 2 German ships, Bismarck and Columbus, are handed over as war reparations and renamed Majestic and Homeric. The Majestic becomes White Star's new flagship, the largest ship in the world at 56,551 tons. But she's German-designed, German-built, a spoil of war, not a White Star creation. The soul of the company died at Harland and Wolff with Titanic and Britannic, and the brief prosperity is illusory. In 1924, the United States passes the Immigration Act, imposing strict quotas on European immigration. The steerage trade that generated reliable profits for 50 years collapses overnight. Fewer emigrants means fewer passengers. Fewer passengers means lower revenues. White Star is bleeding. The Titanic's ghost haunts every booking. The Britannic lies at the bottom of the Aegean. The fleet is aging. The competition is fierce. Cunard has government backing. White Star has debts. IMM, the parent company Morgan built, enters receivership in 1915. It survives but never thrives. White Star remains the only profitable subsidiary. But even profitable isn't the same as healthy. The storm that would finally kill the company was gathering force, and it would come from Wall Street. International Mercantile Marine finally surrenders White Star Line. After 25 years of American ownership, the company returns to British hands. The buyer is the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company, a sprawling conglomerate controlled by Lord Kylesant. The price, £7 million, roughly $34 million at the time. Bruce Ismay, now 64, watches from the sidelines. The company his father built from a £1,000 gamble, the company he sold to Morgan in 1902, passes to yet another owner. He has no role in the transaction, no influence, no power, just memories and regret. Lord Kylesant is ambitious. He spent a decade acquiring shipping lines, building Royal Mail Group into one of the largest maritime conglomerates in the world. White Star is his crown jewel. He has plans, big plans. At Harland and Wolff, workers lay down the keel of a new superliner. hull number 844. She will be called Oceanic III, named after Thomas Ismay's first revolutionary ship and his final masterpiece. At 1,000 feet long, she'll be the largest vessel ever built. Diesel-electric propulsion, revolutionary design, the ship that will restore White Star to glory. The timing could not be worse. October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday. The New York Stock Exchange collapses. In a single day, $14 billion in value evaporates. Banks fail. Businesses shutter. Unemployment explodes. The Great Depression begins. Transatlantic passenger numbers plummet. Tourism vanishes. The wealthy who once sailed first class now conserve their dwindling fortunes. The emigrants who filled third class can no longer afford passage, and America no longer wants them. The Immigration Act quotas remain in force. The ships sail half empty. At Belfast, construction on Oceanic III slows, then stops. The keel sits on the slipway, rusting. Workers are laid off. The company cannot afford to finish her. In 1929, the project is officially suspended pending further study of propulsion systems. Everyone knows the truth. White Star is broke. The keel is eventually dismantled. The steel is sold for scrap. Oceanic III, White Star's last hope for renewal, never leaves the shipyard. She joins the ghost fleet of ships that might have been. Meanwhile, Royal Mail Group begins to unravel. Kaelsant has financed his acquisitions with debt, enormous debt. As revenues collapse, the payments become impossible. He begins manipulating company accounts, hiding losses, issuing misleading prospectuses to attract investors. In 1931, the truth emerges. Lord Kaelsant is arrested and charged with fraud. The trial reveals systematic deception. He's convicted and sentenced to 12 months in prison. The shipping magnate who bought White Star to build an empire has destroyed himself. White Star is caught in the wreckage. The company is technically solvent but drowning in obligations. The fleet is aging. The Olympic is now 20 years old. The Majestic, for all her size, is a German design with German engines. There's no money for new construction, no money for modernization, barely enough money to keep operating. And White Star isn't alone. Cunard is equally desperate. Their superliner, Hull 534, the future Queen Mary, sits unfinished at John Brown Shipyard in Clydebank, Scotland. Construction halted in December 1931. Thousands of workers idle. The ship that was supposed to capture the blue riband and dominate the Atlantic is a rusting skeleton. Two great companies, two unfinished superliners, neither can survive alone. The British government sees opportunity in catastrophe. If both companies fail, Britain loses its position in transatlantic shipping. Foreign lines will dominate. National prestige will suffer. Something must be done. The solution is brutal but simple. Merge. Negotiations begin in 1933. The government offers £9.5 million in loans, but only if Cunard and White Star combine their North Atlantic operations. No merger, no money. The companies that have competed since Thomas Ismay first challenged Cunard in 1870 must become one or die separately. The terms reflect reality. Cunard is in better shape, newer ships, stronger balance sheet, government subsidies already in place. White Star is weaker, older fleet, Titanic's shadow, Kaelsant's disgrace. Cunard shareholders will own 62% of the merged company. White Star's creditors, not shareholders, creditors, will own 38%. The disparity tells the story. White Star isn't merging. It's being absorbed. December 30th, 1933. The agreement is finalized. The merger will take effect the following spring. The new entity will be called Cunard White Star Limited. Headquarters in Liverpool. Both house flags will fly on all ships. May 10th, 1934. Cunard White Star Limited officially begins operations. White Star contributes 10 ships to the combined fleet. Cunard contributes 15. The math is merciless. Within months, White Star vessels begin disappearing. The Olympic, old reliable, the ship that survived collisions, U-boats, and 24 years of service, is deemed too old, too expensive, too outdated. In 1935, she's sold for scrap. Workers at Jarrow dismantle her piece by piece. Her panelling ends up decorating a hotel restaurant in Alnwick, Northumberland. The Majestic follows, then Homeric, then others. By the end of 1936, only 3 White Star ships remain in the combined fleet: Britannic the third, Georgic, and Laurentic the second. The rest are broken up, sold off, erased. The Queen Mary enters service in May 1936. She's magnificent. 80,774 tons, 31 knots. The ship Hull 534 was always meant to become. She captures the blue riband on her maiden voyage. Headlines celebrate Cunard's triumph. No one mentions White Star. Bruce Ismay lives to see none of it. On October 17th, 1937, just weeks after Olympic scrapping is completed, he dies in London. Cerebral thrombosis complicated by diabetes. He's 74 years old. The obituaries dwell on Titanic, on the lifeboats, on the accusations of cowardice that followed him for 25 years. The man who ran White Star during its greatest triumph and worst disaster is buried quietly. The company he once led exists now only as a name on Cunard's letterhead, and even that wouldn't last. The erasure begins immediately. Cunard White Star Limited inherits a combined fleet of 25 ships. Within 2 years, half of them are gone. The calculus is simple. Cunard vessels are newer, faster, more efficient. White Star ships are older, slower, more expensive to operate. When cuts must be made, the decision is obvious. The Olympic goes first. For 24 years, she's been the reliable sister, the one that didn't sink, the one that rammed a submarine, the one that carried troops to France and emigrants to America and socialites to Southampton. She's made 257 round-trip Atlantic crossings, transported 430,000 passengers, survived everything the ocean could throw at her. None of it matters. In April 1935, Olympic sails to Jarrow for dismantling. Workers who've spent years unemployed in the Depression now find jobs tearing apart the ship that once symbolized British maritime supremacy. The grand staircase is ripped out. The first-class dining room is demolished. The Turkish baths, the swimming pool, the Café Parisien, all of it reduced to salvage. Some pieces survive. Panelling ends up in the White Swan Hotel in Alnwick. Light fixtures appear in antique shops. But the ship herself, the 46,439 tons of steel and ambition that launched a year before Titanic, becomes razor blades and rebar. The Majestic follows, largest ship in the world when she entered White Star service in 1922. She's now surplus inventory. Too big, too expensive, too German in origin. She's sold to the Royal Navy as a training ship, renamed HMS Caledonia. In 1939, she catches fire at Rosyth and burns for hours. The hulk is scrapped during the war. Another White Star superliner gone. Homeric, Doric, Albertic. The names disappear from Lloyd's Register one by one. Sold, scrapped. abandoned. Each departure takes another piece of White Star's identity. Each sale confirms the obvious. This merger wasn't a partnership. It was an execution. By 1937, the original White Star fleet has been reduced to 3 ships. Britannic 3, not the hospital ship, but a motor vessel built in 1930. Georgic, her sister, launched in 1932. Laurentic 2, a smaller liner from 1927. That's all that remains. October 17th, 1937. Bruce Ismay dies in his London home at 74. The newspapers mark his passing with the word that's defined him for a quarter century: Titanic. The Telegraph calls him a man who never recovered from a tragedy. The Times dwells on the lifeboat controversy. Even in death, he cannot escape April 1912. He's buried at Putney Vale Cemetery, a modest grave. No grand monument, no shipping magnate's mausoleum, just a headstone marking the end of a life spent in the shadow of 1,500 ghosts. The company he once led is barely recognizable. Cunard White Star operates primarily as Cunard. The Queen Mary dominates headlines. The Queen Elizabeth, launched in 1938, largest liner ever built, carries the company's hopes for post-war dominance. Both ships are painted Cunard's distinctive orange-red. Both fly the Cunard Lion. The White Star on the red burgee still appears on stationery, on menus, on china. But passengers book Cunard. They sail Cunard. They tell their grandchildren they crossed the Atlantic on Cunard. White Star becomes a hyphenated afterthought. War interrupts the decline. September 1939. Britain again requisitions merchant vessels for military service. Georgic and Britannic 3 become troop transports. They carry soldiers to North Africa, Italy, the Pacific. Georgic is bombed in 1941 at Port Tewfik, severely damaged but not destroyed. She's rebuilt and returns to service. The Queens become the war's secret weapons. Their speed, over 30 knots, allows them to outrun any submarine. They carry entire divisions across the Atlantic without escort. Hitler allegedly offers a $250,000 reward and the Iron Cross to any U-boat captain who sinks either ship. None succeed. But these are Cunard achievements, Cunard glory. White Star's contribution is a footnote. The war ends. The ships return to civilian service, and Cunard's shareholders decide to finish what the merger started. Cunard offers to purchase the remaining 38% stake held by White Star's creditors. The price is undisclosed. The negotiation is brief. The creditors want out. Cunard wants control. December 31st, 1949. Cunard White Star Limited officially becomes Cunard Line Limited. The hyphen disappears. The White Star name is erased from the corporate registry. 91 years after Thomas Ismay purchased a bankrupt company's name and house flag for £1,000, the White Star Line ceases to exist as a legal entity. The ships that remain keep sailing. Britannic 3 operates until 1960, running cruises and Atlantic crossings. On November 25, 1960, she completes her final voyage from Liverpool to New York. She's the last ship to operate under White Star colors, the last vessel to fly the White Star on the red burgee in commercial service. Then she's sold to a breaker's yard, dismantled in Scotland. Gone. Georgic follows. The fleet is finished. Cunard keeps the White Star flags flying on a few vessels until 1968. A courtesy, a memorial. Then even that ends. The burgees are lowered. The stars disappear. The shipping line that once carried more passengers across the Atlantic than any other becomes a paragraph in maritime history books. But not everything is lost. In Belfast Harbour, a small vessel still floats, SS Nomadic, built in 1911 at Harland and Wolff, hull number 422, just 220 feet long, designed as a tender, a ferry to carry passengers from shore to the great liners anchored in deep water. She served Titanic, carried first and second class passengers from Cherbourg to the ship on April 10, 1912. Those passengers walked her gangways, crossed her decks, boarded the doomed liner through her side. Some of them survived. Most did not. Nomadic is the last White Star vessel afloat, the only surviving ship built for the company that once ruled the Atlantic. After decades of service as a restaurant, a floating nightclub, a neglected hulk in Paris, she's returned to Belfast, restored, preserved, moored in the Titanic quarter, within sight of the slipways where her massive sisters were born. She's a relic now, a museum piece, a 113-year-old reminder of what Thomas Ismay built and what Bruce Ismay lost. And she carries a warning that shipping companies would do well to remember. Belfast, Northern Ireland, today. If you walk through the Titanic quarter, past the towering museum shaped like a ship's prow, past the slipways where Olympic and Titanic once took shape, you'll find her, the SS Nomadic, 221 feet long, white hull, single funnel, built in 1911 to ferry passengers from Cherbourg's harbour to the great liners anchored offshore. Too large to dock, she's the last White Star Line vessel still floating. Everything else is gone. The Olympic was scrapped in 1935. Her panelling decorates a hotel restaurant in northern England. The Britannic lies in 400 feet of Aegean water, her hull slowly collapsing. The Titanic rests 2.5 miles down in the North Atlantic, her grand staircase an empty void, her bridge scattered across the seabed. The ships are gone. The company is gone. The flag hasn't flown since 1968. But if you listen to what the Nomadic can tell you, if you understand what the White Star story means, you'll hear 3 lessons that every company, every leader, every empire needs to understand. Lesson 1. Hubris kills faster than icebergs. The Titanic wasn't destroyed by ice. She was destroyed by certainty. The certainty that 16 lifeboats were enough because the regulations said so. The certainty that the watertight compartments made the ship unsinkable. The certainty that maintaining 22 knots through an ice field was acceptable because the ship was too magnificent to fail. Alexander Carlisle designed davits capable of holding 64 lifeboats. The original plans called for 48. White Star installed 20. When the iceberg struck, those 20 boats could hold 1,178 people. There were 2,224 aboard. The mathematics of death were built into the ship before she ever left Belfast. Thomas Ismay built White Star on a philosophy of comfort and safety as important as speed. His son inherited the company, but not the wisdom. Bruce Ismay wanted size. He wanted headlines. He wanted to answer Cunard's Lusitania and Mauretania with ships so massive they dominate every photograph. And when his chief designer suggested more lifeboats, he saw cluttered decks, not saved lives. The Titanic didn't sink because of an iceberg. She sank because the men who built her believed she couldn't. Lesson 2. Reputation is the only asset that can't be rebuilt. White Star survived the Titanic's sinking financially. Insurance paid £1 million. Lawsuits settled for $664,000. The Olympic continued sailing. The Britannic was already under construction. The company was wounded, but not dead. What died that night was trust. Every passenger who boarded a White Star ship after April 15th, 1912, knew they were boarding a line that had promised the unsinkable and delivered 1,500 corpses. Every headline about the company included the words Titanic disaster. Every competitor could point to those 16 lifeboats and say, "This is what White Star thinks your life is worth." Cunard received government subsidies specifically because White Star had been sold to Americans. Cunard built the Queen Mary specifically because White Star couldn't complete the Oceanic. Cunard absorbed White Star specifically because the Titanic had made the company too weak to survive alone. Thomas Ismay spent 30 years building White Star's reputation as the premium choice for transatlantic travel. His son spent 10 years managing it. The iceberg destroyed it in 160 minutes. You can replace ships, you can settle lawsuits, you can hire new executives and order new construction. You cannot replace the moment when the world learns you valued deck space over human life. Lesson 3. Every empire is one decision away from collapse. The White Star Line wasn't killed by bad luck. It was killed by a single choice made in a single meeting. Reduce the lifeboats from 48 to 16. That choice cost a few £1,000s in davit installation. It saved deck space. It met Board of Trade regulations. It was legal, defensible, and catastrophically wrong. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, that decision became 1,500 deaths. When Bruce Ismay stepped into collapsible sea, that decision became his eternal shame. When the Britannic sank 4 years later, that decision became a pattern of failure. When Cunard demanded 62% of the merged company, that decision became White Star's erasure. Every empire believes it's too powerful to fall. Every empire is wrong. The question is only what triggers the collapse and whether the leaders see it coming. Thomas Ismay saw the future in iron steamships and invested everything. His son saw the future in size and splendor and ordered the biggest ships ever built. Neither saw that the future would be determined not by the ships themselves, but by a single question. If this ship sinks, can everyone aboard survive? White Star answered no and called it acceptable. The sea answered differently. What happened to the people who built this empire? Thomas Ismay never saw the disaster. He died in 1899, believing his company would dominate the 20th century. His vision was correct. His timing was merciful. Bruce Ismay lived 25 years after the Titanic, most of them in self-imposed exile. He spent his winters in Ireland, his summers avoiding London society. His hair went white, his health declined. He died in 1937, 2 weeks after the Olympic was scrapped. The newspapers that had called him J. Brute in 1912 noted his passing with the same accusations. Lord Pirrie, the Harland and Wolff chairman who'd agreed to the lifeboat reduction, died in 1924 aboard a ship crossing the Atlantic, the route he'd helped design. He never faced public accountability for the Titanic. History remembers him as a great shipbuilder. The survivors scattered. The widows settled claims. The children grew old. Milvina Dean, 9 weeks old when the Titanic sank, lived until 2009. She died at 97, the last survivor, having sold her memorabilia to pay nursing home bills. Stand in the Titanic quarter today. Look at the slipways where the great ships took shape. Look at the nomadic, restored and gleaming, the last physical evidence that White Star ever existed. Look at the museum that draws millions of visitors to gawk at the tragedy, to marvel at the hubris, to wonder how anyone could have been so certain about something so uncertain. The answer is simple. They believed their own marketing. They believed the ship was unsinkable because they'd built her. They believed 16 lifeboats were sufficient because the law said so. They believed their name, White Star, would protect them from consequences. They were wrong. The nomadic sits in Belfast Harbour, the last survivor of an empire that once ruled the Atlantic. The ships she serviced are gone. The company she represented is gone. The passengers she ferried, the first-class passengers of Olympic and Titanic, stepping aboard in their evening dress, confident in the unsinkable promise, are gone. What remains is a lesson. Never believe your ship can't sink. Never value deck space over human lives. Never assume the law's minimum standard is the moral maximum. And never, ever build the largest moving object on Earth with lifeboats for only half the people aboard. Thomas Ismay purchased a bankrupt shipping line for £1,000 in 1868 and built an empire. 66 years later, that empire was absorbed by its greatest rival, all because someone decided that 16 lifeboats would be enough. Welcome to what's left of the White Star Line, where the world's greatest shipping empire was built, dominated, and destroyed by a single fatal decision.